Joined by Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz. Professor, isn't the important question here whether there's evidence of crimes, not all of these geographic issues that you're writing about?
Well, you need process, too. In order to determine whether there's enough evidence, you need a fair process. And all I said is that the prosecutor's decision to convene a second grand jury, he already had a grand jury in Virginia, had the effect, maybe not the intent, but had the effect of giving him a tactical advantage. If there ever is going to be a trial, any prosecutor would rather try Trump associates in the District of Columbia than in Virginia, and any defense attorney would rather defend his client in Virginia than in the District of Columbia. That's just the reality. There isn't an experienced prosecutor, an experienced defense attorney who's honest who would deny that.
Well, Professor, when you say that, though, you make it sound as if you say that effect, but you make it sound as if that is part of some sort of bug in the system. If the individuals and the possible incidents or alleged crimes occurred in Washington, why wouldn't that be the natural place to move forward?
Well, because we already have a grand jury in Virginia, and if these crimes occur, they occurred all over the world. The District of Columbia, which doesn't, really vote in presidential elections, is certainly not the only place to have a trial. But if I were a prosecutor, I would certainly want to bring the case in the District of Columbia, and if I were a defense attorney, I would try to bring it elsewhere. That's not to say that you can't get a fair trial in the District of Columbia. Of course you can. I'm a member of the District of Columbia Bar. I practice there. It's a very fair place, and it doesn't mean you can't get a fair trial in Virginia. But any defense attorney will tell you, and any prosecutor will tell you, that demography matters, that where you try a case matters. And prosecutors will tell you sometimes, you better plead guilty because we have a terrific jury pool that won't be sympathetic to you. And that's an actual argument that prosecutors make. And
well, you bring up the jury pool. Let me go to that, because obviously this is another piece of this debate. Number one, we're nowhere near an actual traditional jury pool because we're nowhere near indictments. I know, I understand, Professor. Let me get the question out. Let me get the question out, and then you get to answer. So we're nowhere near there. But with regard to the grand jury, you're bringing up the potential. You said demography, or in other comments you said race.
No, you're missing my point. You're deliberately distorting my point.
I'm not deliberately distorting your point, Professor. I'm trying to present a question to you, which I haven't even asked yet because of the accusations you're making. So please hold for a second. When I finish the question, you'll get to respond. My question, yes, my question to you is, if we both understand the jury system, if the ultimate jury for a potential indictment has not been selected yet, and the grand jury is secret, and nobody knows the race of either of those potential groups, how is race relevant? Your turn.
Well, first of all, the grand jury is irrelevant. The grand jury are 23 puppets seated on furniture who are told what to do by the grand puppeteer, who is the prosecutor. A grand jury will indict a ham sandwich if the prosecutor tells it to do so. So the only thing that's relevant is the petty jury pool. And the petty jury pool in the District of Columbia consists of many more Democrats than it would be in Virginia. That's why a prosecutor would want to try the case. And if he's going to want to try the case in front of a petty jury in Washington, he has to now convene a grand jury in Washington, because where you get the indictment is where you try the case. I am not making a controversial point. You're trying to make it controversial. It is not controversial.
Professor, with all due respect, you have no idea why I'm trying to ask you a question or not. You're sidetracking by suggesting that my question is in pursuit of controversy. I'm asking you questions because you're an expert who is speaking out on these issues.
The question, what is the question? Do you actually think that a prosecutor doesn't have a better chance of getting a conviction of Trump associates in the District of Columbia than in Virginia? Is that your position?
I appreciate you asking me questions to handicap the future proceeding. My next question for you, though, is does any of this apply to the Ken Starr example?
I don't understand your question. Why? What is the?
Well, Ken Starr obviously was pursuing a Democratic president, but in Washington.
Right. Of course, because he was pursuing him in Washington. He was also pursuing them in Virginia. There were grand juries, if I'm not mistaken. This is a long time ago. I don't understand what that has to do with anything. We're talking now about the possible effect of moving the grand jury from Virginia to the District of Columbia. I'm stating an absolutely uncontroversial, factual position that every experienced and honest lawyer will agree with. And that is, a prosecutor is better off bringing a case against Trump associates in a district that is overwhelmingly Democrat than in a district in a swing state. That is an uncontroversial point. You're trying to turn it into something else, and you're not succeeding. I'm sorry.
I appreciate that you think you're clairvoyant about what I'm trying to do. These are straightforward questions.
It's so obvious.
While I have you, the other question I want to ask was about the potential federal laws implicated. I'm going to put some up on the screen. There's been a lot of debate over what the actual issue would be here. There's the campaign laws, as you know. There's this Foreign Agents Registration Act, which is a felony but is rarely prosecuted. Corruption laws, the Logan Act, anti-money laundering, and then, of course, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, which seems like a strong hook for the hacking. What do you think, from your expertise, are the key federal statutes that Mueller would be looking at?
You know, when I was a law professor, I used to give my student an exam. I would ask them to identify every conceivable statute under which a person could be indicted, and the students would give a great list, just like the list you put up. The second part of the question would be to exercise your judgment and to tell me what realistically you think they could be prosecuted under, and that's what distinguished the great students from the very good students. So, you know, when Joseph Stalin spoke to Lavrenti Beria, and Beria said to him, "Show me the man, then I'll find you the crime," obviously you can find crimes by anybody who's engaged in complicated behavior. You have to look at President. Take the Logan Amendment. Of course there are violations of the Logan Amendment. Every day there are violations of the Logan Amendment. But it hasn't been prosecuted since 1803. You know, when President Reagan spoke to the Iranians and told them that he would like to keep the American hostages for an extra month so that he gets credit for their release, that was a violation of the Logan Amendment.
Interesting.
Obviously, nobody was prosecuted for that. When President Bush pardoned Caspar Weinberger, that closed the investigation, and the special prosecutor said that that was a cover-up, but nobody was prosecuted. The question is not what conceivable statutes could be touched, but what realistically there are precedents for prosecuting.
And with the time running out, my last question for you, sir, is have you provided any formal counsel to Donald Trump or his aides, or accepted any money, or would you consider providing counsel to them?
What an insulting question. I mean, have I accepted money? I'm a liberal Democrat. I supported Hillary Clinton. I campaigned for Hillary Clinton. I wanted to see Hillary Clinton president. My comments are public comments because I believe in them. And please don't try to insult my integrity by suggesting that somehow I'm in somebody's pocket.
Professor, that's not. This is not about integrity. I'm asking you a straightforward question. That's a no. I take it that's a no.
If Hillary Clinton had been elected president and they were saying lock him up, I would be saying the same thing. I am condemning Donald Trump for calling for an investigation of Hillary Clinton. That would be a terrible, terrible thing to do.
Right. So that's a no that you. But you're a very celebrated attorney who's taken on a lot of different cases. Is that a no that this is not a case you would consider at this time?
Look, I'm writing a book about this case. It's called Trumped Up: How the Criminalization of Politics Endangers Democracy. That's my point. I'm a civil libertarian. I approach this case from a civil liberties point of view. Sometimes my statement helped Democrats, sometimes it helped Republicans. That's not the criteria by which I make statements. I make these statements because I want to protect the civil liberties of all Americans. I want to keep the criminal law narrow. I want to make sure we don't have accordion-like criminal statutes that can be applied to anybody, whether it be Democrat or Republican, if you're their enemy. That's an issue that should concern all Americans.
Professor Dershowitz, appreciate your time today. Thanks for coming on The Beat.